Okay, our last speaker in this session is Daniel Umlauf, and he's going to be presenting his work on determining legal competence in older adults. Remember, after this talk, then all of the speakers are going to come back up, and you can ask questions to any of the speakers.
Thank you, Danny. It's good to be with you all this morning. I've got an exciting topic. We're going to talk about legal determinations of incompetence. Doesn't that sound grand? The fun stuff. I did just this morning think of a subtitle that I'd like to add to it that I think might spark additional interest from you, and that is the $7 billion per year legal technique that could save $7 billion for our seniors in this country every year, and I will get into more about that as I go along. So the $7 billion legal technique to preserve money for our seniors. Rachel Falls turned 79 on October 21st, 2017. She lived in Atlanta, Georgia. She was a career woman. She was married but had lived separately from her husband for over 30 years. She had lived in Atlanta for almost her entire adult life. She didn't have any children with her husband. He had had one daughter, so she had one stepdaughter with him, but they weren't close. They had an amicable relationship, but he lived in Virginia while she was down in Georgia. She had family in Winston-Salem, and so she planned to move back here. She was 79 years old. She had retired at that point and had decided that it was time to move back and be closer to some family. She drove up here all by herself for her birthday on October 21st, drove back down to Georgia, and then came back up over the Thanksgiving break in 2017. Again, drove up here. At that time, she was touring some retirement communities. I won't say which ones they were, as we have some sponsors here, but identified some that she really enjoyed and settled on one, talked to them. They had a spot and decided where she was going to live when she came back up here. Her planned move was for early January of 2018, at the beginning of this year. She met with me. We talked about updating her legal documents. She had documents done in Georgia, financial and healthcare powers of attorney, and wills that had named her husband, whom she had lived apart with for a long time, and then his stepdaughter as her powers of attorney should or if or when something should happen to her and she wasn't able to handle her own affairs. That was over the Thanksgiving break. She drove back down to Georgia, and then on December 9th, she got a phone call at about 9 o'clock at night from her stepdaughter, whom she hadn't talked to in over a year, that said, "I am almost to Atlanta. I need to see you about something of some urgency." And she said, "Wow, that's odd." She thought it was so odd that she called some other family members just to say that her stepdaughter was on her way. That was Saturday, December 9th. On Sunday, December 10th, we aren't exactly sure what happened at this point, but she went with her stepdaughter, drove across Atlanta, past many reputable hospitals to a facility called the Eastside Behavioral Health Center. They entered that facility. Her stepdaughter talked to the receptionist or the intake person and said, "I'm here with my mother, who is experiencing hallucinations. She's disoriented, incoherent, can't really speak to us." They sat in the waiting area for some time and then met with the doctor. We went back into the room with the doctor, and in a consultation or evaluation for about 10 minutes, Ms. Falls was incoherent, according to the doctor's notes, and presumably she was at that time. And so he was not able to talk to her and find out what was going on. He had to rely solely on the testimony or the statements of her stepdaughter, who said, "She has been like this, and these events are becoming more and more frequent, and I'm very worried and concerned about her health." Span of 10 minutes, the doctor said, "Well, she certainly does seem that way. I'm going to go ahead and declare her incompetent. And as the power of attorney, both financial and healthcare, you will now be able to make those choices for her." He wrote up some papers. Her stepdaughter said to him, "Could I get that in writing? I'm going to need the financial in writing so that I can become her financial power of attorney. I'm going to need to do that to access her bank account so I can pay your bills." I thought that was particularly charming. Over the course of the next 5 days, she transferred, her stepdaughter transferred her house out of her name and remove several $100,000 out of her 401k. Family got involved at that point, and I'm going to leave the story there for the moment. Some fun statistics. 2015 study said that they estimated there was $36.5 billion in elder abuse fraud in the United States, 17 billion of which was technically legal but obtained under exploitative means. So technically legal, and that would have been our scenario here. She had consulted with an attorney, the stepdaughter, beforehand, did something very tricky. Many powers of attorney don't allow you or limit the amount of money that you can give to yourself. And so the stepdaughter transferred that property not to herself, but into a revocable trust of her father, who was also incapacitated, and so that she controlled that trust, and it was going to come to her as well. So she was very sharp. She knew the law, knew what she was doing. $36.5 billion in illegally or not rightly obtained funds, elder law, financial abuse every year. It's estimated, there's some different reports on this, but between 1 in 10 and 1 in 14 people who reach the age of 65 will experience some sort of elder abuse in their lifetime. I'm sure none of this is news to many of you. That number jumps to 50% for people who are diagnosed with dementia. 50% of all of our seniors who are diagnosed with dementia will experience some sort of elder abuse. 60 to 67% of that abuse is perpetrated by spouses or adult children. Not even extended family members, those very closest to them. Oftentimes it's children fighting, and one of the major reasons that is possible that happens is because it's those people who are named as their financial power of attorney and are able to legally take control of their finances at that point. So, legal incompetence. What does that mean? We're going to focus on not just legal incompetence, but specifically the process by which someone is declared to be legally incompetent. But first, legal incompetence. Legal incompetence, there's no Latin involved in that legal definition. It is just about exactly the same as its more commonly used definition. You are competent if you're able to ride a bicycle. You're competent at being able to ride a bike. If you are able to blow up a balloon, you're competent at being able to blow up a balloon. Incompetence is the inability to do either of those things. And legal incompetence is just slightly broader. It is defined as the inability to handle your own affairs. It's that general, the inability to handle your own affairs. What they're thinking of there is the inability to manage your everyday adult life, to handle your finances, to manage those appropriately, to follow a budget, to be able to grocery shop for yourself, to make sure you're getting nutritious food and nutritious meals, to be able to manage your finances, navigate the community, get yourself to doctor's appointments and other types of things. If you are unable to do those things, you are determined to be legally incompetent. If you are unable to handle your own affairs, that is a scary situation. We need someone to protect you at that point, and someone appointed to be able to manage your finances who can step in and take over your bank account and make sure that those bills are getting paid, to stop you from paying $300 a month to get your dog groomed when you don't have enough money for groceries. That was a recent case. So we need someone appointed. Whenever someone is declared legally incompetent, we need someone appointed and given the legal authority to step in and take over that person's affairs. There's two ways that people can be declared legally incompetent in our country. First one is through the court system. This system, like many court proceedings, as a lawyer, I think it's pretty well thorough and documented and safe for people. We're going to have the judge typically have you checked out by a psychologist, a medical doctor, and a social worker to determine who will go out to your house and see how your living conditions are. Are you able to keep your house clean and in a sanitary condition? And they'll come back and report to the court. If you're determined to be incompetent, the court's then going to look at who would be best to appoint as to be your guardian, if you've heard of a guardianship proceeding or a conservatorship proceeding in many states. And the court will appoint that person. The other way to do it is through your powers of attorney. That is a legal document that I'm just going to go into in a little bit more depth that most of you know about. It is typically, when we think of it, or I think when the general public thinks of it, it is a document that allows us to name the person who will take over our affairs if or when we are declared to be incompetent. We want to do that on the front end. We don't want the court to get involved and be able to name that person. We want to take control of that and specify who that person will be. Usually it is one of those family members or close or spouse to be able to do that. What most people don't know, and what we're going to try to do, is that you are also able to specify the conditions under which you are determined to be incompetent. So the law allows people to say, this person is going to determine that I'm incompetent. The default in all of these statutes for powers of attorney across the country is that a doctor will be the one to determine that. But the newer statutes, the old ones were typically silent and just presumed that. The newer statutes explicitly allow people to name the people who will determine that they are incompetent. So just a quick jump back to Miss Rachel Falls' situation. She was able to go into, her stepdaughter was able to take her into that doctor's office. I was able to see her in 10 minutes with zero oversight. He wasn't required to pull in anyone else. He acted as a judge. His stepdaughter, who had a financial interest in her being declared incompetent, was able to provide all the information. There was no advocate, no lawyer representing Ms. Falls' case and representing that. He had no medical history to go off of. He had no idea that she lived completely independently up until the day prior, handled her own affairs with zero concerns from any of her family members who were much closer to her. He didn't know that she was not close to that family member. So all of those things, when we have these powers of attorney, those are some of the dangers. Those are some of the dangers that allow that $17 billion to be perpetrated every year. My $7 billion remark, I am fairly conservative and deliberate with my words as an attorney, and I think that that is a reasonable estimate of how much money we could save if we did something differently immediately. And so what I want to do is take advantage of these new laws and tweak our powers of attorney, make them a little bit more robust. I actually want to name a panel of people, of our closest family and friends, perhaps church members, perhaps neighbors, whomever knows us the best, to be the ones to determine when we are incompetent. A key thing here will be more than one person, so that we've got to get agreement between people before that power of attorney, that single person gets to take control of their finances. At least more than one person has to agree that that person is in fact incompetent. I think my time is up, but that is the gist of it. I need you all to understand that I think all of us presume that the doctors have to do that. Doctors have done a great job under the circumstances. We couldn't ask them to do anything else. But there is a way that can save our seniors and most vulnerable people a lot of money and heartache. So.